So we back at it again, man, with another episode of Locked In. Welcome to episode 20. I have another special guest for y'all today. We have Allana Haynes here. I'm gonna just go ahead and let her introduce herself to y'all real quick and let y'all know what she does.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allana Haynes, and I am an interim reporter for Baltimore Sun Media in Baltimore, Maryland. And I've been there for about 3 years now.
For sure. So when did you first start getting into writing?
Yeah, well, writing has been something that I've been doing pretty much my whole life. English was one of my favorite subjects in school, as well as history. And I kind of had a natural apt for writing. And so it later just kind of manifested itself into journalism. But it started out just kind of through creative writing, just writing stories about things that I knew. And also I enjoy reading as well.
And then did anything or anyone inspire you to, want to become an editorial assistant?
Um, well, getting into being an editorial assistant, that was kind of a path that I didn't foresee myself going on. The thing about journalism is that there's not really a specific path. It's just kind of where the job is. So the cool thing about being an editorial assistant is that it gives you a bit of a taste of everything. So I get to work with all different people in the newsroom. I get to work with editors. I get to work with reporters. So I really get a sense of really how the whole newsroom functions. And from there, I've been able to kind of carve out my own niche and carve out my own path.
And then speaking on being an editorial assistant, just explain a little bit about what your duties and responsibilities are being an editorial assistant.
Yeah, so what my job is that I mostly work with events. So people in the community have the opportunity to submit events that are happening in their community, whether it be a big event or a small event. And what I do is I compile a calendar so people can get a sense of what's happening in their community. So for the month of November, for example, they'll see, oh, this is happening in my community. I might want to look into that, or that might be an event that I'm interested in attending. So maybe if there's somebody who's new to a community or just doesn't know what's going on in their community, they can look at our paper and see like, oh, okay, these are some events that I might be interested in attending. But since the pandemic, a lot of events have been canceled or postponed or moved online. So we don't have as many events that have been trickling in as we usually do. So what I've been doing since March is I've been mostly reporting.
Speaking on the pandemic, as you just mentioned, did that affect you in any type of way? Because I know it was rough for a lot of people. Like, did that affect your writing? Were you still able to, work and do other things like that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much my entire job changed since the pandemic. One of my colleagues, he left in March, really the week after everything shut down because of the pandemic. And we were just kind of in this scramble trying to figure out how we were going to continue to move forward with the paper and not having a reporter in that position. So because a lot of people had been canceling their events, that pretty much dried up my job. So they put me in his job. So I've been learning this job on the fly since the pandemic. Typically, when people get hired, they go through an orientation process, a training process, just to kind of learn the ropes of what they're going to be doing. But I didn't have that. It was literally the pandemic happened and they threw me in the deep end of this job. So I've been learning as I've been going. So it's been very intense, but I've learned a lot.
Yeah, speaking on, it being so intense and you learning things on the fly, how do you, like, with all the work that you have, how do you manage to organize, plan, and prioritize all of that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, my job really doesn't follow a specific schedule. So every day I log onto my computer and I really don't know what to expect. So I usually kind of have a rough outline of what I'm going to be doing that day, but it could pivot at the drop of a hat. So there's some days when I'm expecting it to be a slower day, and then all of a sudden I'll get an email from my editor saying, oh, can you look into this? And so I'll really just kind of have to drop what I was working on and chase after another assignment. So it's really not a set schedule that I have. It's really just kind of whatever comes at me. I just kind of have to roll with it.
And I know that you attended Columbia University, and I read that you had a degree in science and journalism. Just talk about your experience at Columbia University and how that molded you into, your position today.
Yeah, I graduated from Columbia in 2017, May 2017. And it was a very intensive program. It's only 8.5 months, so the duration of one school year. So we started at the beginning of August and it wrapped up in May of the following year. So the whole program is 10 classes and a thesis, all in 8.5 months. So it's very intense. We do a lot of like half quarters. So usually in college, you might do a semester where a class will last about 16 weeks. So we did a lot of classes that were half that. So like 8-week classes, then we move on to another set of classes. So it was a lot of information packed into a short amount of time. So the first semester was really kind of more so fundamental. So learning about the business of journalism, learning about law, learning about the history, just kind of more so like general education classes. And then the second half was kind of more so specialty classes. So you can kind of customize your own schedule, like what you're most interested in learning. So say you're interested in broadcast, you could choose to do broadcast classes. Or if you're more interested in doing more magazine type writing, you could take classes for that. So the first semester was very intense, and it was that way by design, just to kind of break people out of their molds, because a lot of people would come in with a set focus. Like, I'm a print reporter, I'm a TV reporter, but at the beginning they just had everybody doing everything. So I learned a lot of things that I had never done before. They had me doing radio, which I had never done before. They had me doing television, which I had never done before. So it was a very well-rounded experience. And in addition to those classes, we also had to do a thesis. So my thesis ended up being a 5,000 word research project. And
Uh,
so it was very intense, and it was about 6 months that it took to put it together. And my project was on historically Black churches and the Black Lives Matter movement, and trying to get an understanding as to why the historically Black church isn't at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement like it was during the civil rights movement. So just kind of looking at those two relationships, the civil rights movement and Black Lives Matter, and exploring the parallels.
Speaking on all the classes that you took, which you said, were very intense, what would you say is the most interesting class you took while your time at Columbia University?
Oh, I took a class called narrative writing, and I think that was my favorite class,
Okay.
just because it taught me how to write in a way that I've never written before. It taught me how to approach journalism almost in the way that you would approach writing for TV or writing for a novel, almost like creative writing, and being able to tell real life stories, but in a way that's um, almost follows the way like a television show would unfold or a novel would unfold. So I really learned a lot about writing and different ways of writing through that class.
And, and I know I read up on how you cover stories in suburban communities in Baltimore City. What would you say is the most interesting story you've covered so far?
Oh, wow. I've done a lot. I think probably a story that I wrote last year. It was actually a project that I did also on historically Black churches. I did a 6-month enterprise project
Mm.
exploring historically Black churches in Carroll County, which is it's a community outside of Baltimore City. It's northwest of Baltimore City. And if you know anything about Carroll County, it's predominantly white community. It's over 91% white, but they have a really strong and thriving historically Black church community. And I think the county is maybe less than 4% Black, but they have these churches that have history that have gone back to post-slavery over 100 years. And so I looked at these churches and I looked at them almost as a world within a world. And I talked to pastors at the churches, I talked to congregants, I talked to historians, just to get a sense of how have these churches been able to really sustain themselves for so long in a community that's is predominantly white. And so I talked to 4 different churches for the piece, and was able to also talk to experts, historians, and kind of get a sense of how the historically Black church isn't unique to Carroll County, but is also just kind of a nationwide phenomenon. So that was a really cool project that I got to do last year.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a lot of hard work too, so kudos to you for putting that together for sure.
Thank you.
And just speaking on stories, would you say that story that or project that you worked on was your most compassionate story you've ever written, or would you say another project is what's the most compassionate project you've ever done or written? Something that really meant something to you.
I think probably that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're speaking about it, it sounds like you put a lot of hard work and thought into it. So I would probably say that one for sure too. Most definitely. All right, so for the audience out there, how would you describe your writing skills? You being the editorial assistant, what would you say your strengths and weaknesses are?
Oh, I think probably one of my strengths is long form. I really love long form. I really like writing longer stories. I really like writing stories that require a lot of research and a lot of reporting that take a little bit longer to put together, but really dive deep into a topic. And I think one of my weaknesses is probably the shorter form and having to turn things over really quickly. And the majority of my job now is doing a lot of shorter pieces that have to be turned around really quickly. So that was an adjustment, having to get used to not having as much time to dive into a story.
Sure. And then I know you're currently working with the Baltimore Sun. How did that job come about? Because I'm pretty sure when you got the news, you were so excited. But just talk about how you were able to get that job.
Yeah, well, like I said, I graduated from Columbia in May of 2017, and I started at the Sun in October of 2017. So it was about 4 months that it took to land a
Wow.
job. And that was probably one of the hardest experiences, just looking for a job out of school, hearing a lot of no's, sending in a lot of job applications, going on a lot of interviews, and not really getting the outcome that you had expected. And so when the Baltimore Sun came around, I was at a point where I was just like fatigued of looking for work. I was just at a point where I was just like, something has to come through.
Right.
And so a contact of mine actually at Bowie had met the managing editor of the Baltimore Sun and just had really great things to say about him. And so she didn't have his contact information. So I just used my reporter skills and was able to find his contact information online through the Baltimore Sun website. And I just sent him an email, basically um, introducing myself, telling him what I had done up to that point, my experience in college, my experience in grad school, and basically just saying, I'm looking for work. And I sent a copy of my resume as well as a few clips that I had done. And I think I may have sent my master's project from Columbia as well. And he responded like the same day, like maybe a couple of hours after I sent that email saying, we have an opening for an editorial assistant and we would love for you to come in and interview for the position. And so I think the week that I sent that email, they had already been in the interview process. So they were already actively looking for people. And so I think I was one of the last people to interview for that job. And a couple of days later, they called me and said, we want to offer you the position. So I've been there for 3 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. Really, that's really awesome. I'm glad you also spoke on Bowie too, getting the contact from Bowie because if anybody that's looking out there, attend Bowie State. Attend Bowie State.
Bowie State
Great,
has
great
helped
way
me
to
out a
great.
lot.
I know. Trust me, they help me out a lot, so I know. Great place to network. So I'm just shining light on them. Bowie State is where it's at, everyone. Just to let you know. And then another question I have for you is, what advice would you have for any aspiring, male or female that's looking to become an editorial assistant, pursue that as a career? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, gosh, so many things that I want to say. I would just say be persistent and just don't be afraid to think outside the box when it comes to your ideas. Don't be intimidated by the position that you're in. Don't feel like, well, I'm just starting out and, I don't really have the experience to be able to do whatever. I say if you have a good idea, just go for it and just pursue it and just believe in it and find people who believe in it also, because that's really what's been able to help me get to where I've been. Just coming up with ideas that are outside of the box and other people might not necessarily think are an idea, but just continuing to do the work and show people like, no, this is an idea. It's different, but it's an idea and there's something there. And I've seen in just being persistent and just coming back around to ideas has been fruitful. I mean, I've had ideas that I've pitched to multiple editors before they finally got picked
Wow.
up. So just continue to be persistent and continue to write about what you want to write about, and find people who will support you in your ideas.
For sure. And I know when we recently spoke before, you were telling us about, starting a project on social injustice, I believe.
Yeah, I've been doing a couple of short stories on high school students in the community who have started up these activist groups in the community based on the events of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of that. So it's really amazing to see how those national news events have trickled down to just everyday people, and how how I've been able to see change in these small communities that maybe not a lot of people have heard of, but how those events have really impacted people to want to make change in their communities.
And where do you see yourself within the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I would like to be doing, I think I'd like to be doing work, continuing in what I've already been doing, but just on a larger scale. Maybe instead of working for a suburban paper, maybe working in a city where there might be larger issues, or there might be stories that might affect a larger group of people. So kind of moving, I guess, to a larger platform where my work can reach more people.
For sure. All right, and this is the last thing I'm gonna ask you for this interview,
Okay.
little podcast. I ask this to everybody I interview. Who are your top 3 artists you listening to? Who's getting you in that mode before you start writing?
Oh. Yeah, I've been trying to listen to things that are just uplifting and positive, especially this year, just because it's just been a very dark year.
Yeah,
So I've been trying to combat that with just listening to positive music. So I've been listening to a lot of gospel, a lot of inspirational music. So I've had this artist called Aaron Cole on repeat, and he's kind of an up and coming artist. He's a rapper. He kind of falls into the Christian music lane, but his music is so good, and it's just vibes well, and I like to write to it too, just because it's just good. And then I've been listening to another artist called Cass. I think it's short for Cassandra, and she's also really good too. Very inspirational, uplifting. And then I've been listening to a lot of Lecrae as well. So
I'll have to check those artists out because me personally, I have never heard any of those artists, but I'll definitely be sure to listen to them.
okay,
For
sounds
sure.
good.
And with that being said, I appreciate you once again coming on. I appreciate what you're doing. You know, what you're doing can be looked at as inspiring. And for everyone out there, just go follow your dreams. Really, that's all the words I can put into it. Just follow your dreams and never give up. But once again, you know, I wish you the best and you continue success. And that is it for episode 20 of Locked In, everybody. Make sure y'all tune in for next week's episode and make sure y'all continue to stay locked in.